One introduction Rosep view the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosep view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning, with the adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57 DHW. In June 12, 2025, a cutting French senator becomes the Trump European nemesis. In episode 57 DHW. In One Hope in Hungary 2 headlines 3 France. A cutting French senator becomes the Trump European nemesis in biting verbal assaults viewed by millions. Claude Malhuret has issued a scathing critique of the American president, bringing a lifetime of experience to bear for Congress. Democrats grill National Institutes of Health NIH leader on cuts. Who is calling the shots? Senators criticized the head of the National Institutes of Health for not taking responsibility for Trump administration cuts to research funding. 5 Senate Republicans want to trim some of the Trump populist tax cuts. GOP senators are considering whether to further curb the favorite tax cuts of Trump as they rewrite key portions of the sprawling domestic agenda bill passed by the House. 6 Senator McConnell tells Hegseth the American reputation is at stake in Ukraine war. A testy exchange between a senator who strongly supports Ukraine aid and the defense secretary revealed a deepening split among GOP officials on the war. 7 Britain allocates hundreds of billions to bolster its economy. Reeves, the chancellor of the Exchequer, broke down public spending plans including more money for the military, public transport and affordable housing. 8 Kennedy Jr. announces 8 new members of CDC vaccine advisory panel. The health secretary promised not to pick anti-vaxxers, but some public health leaders accused him of breaking his word. Main content: One Hope in Hungary accepts edited by Hegseth for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian. June 11, 2025. Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary addresses the audience as part of a meeting of the group Patriots for Europe in the European Parliament, gathering European far-right leaders in Mormont-sur-Vernesse Centre, France on June 9, 2025 in the countryside of Mormont-sur-Vernesse. The event was dubbed the Victory Festival. The one on June 9, 2024, exactly 1 year ago, by the National Rally, when its list came out on top in the European election, receiving 31.37% of the votes at the time, the best score in the history of the far-right party in a first-round. Viktor Orban inspired Trump, but at home his grip on power may be loosening. The Hungarian strongman faces an unprecedented political challenge. Campaigners fear a dangerous clampdown. If mega politics has a spiritual leader, it is Viktor Orban. The illiberal playbook of the Hungarian Prime Minister has given Donald Trump a manual for his second-term power grab in the US, while in Europe the winds of nationalism are behind him as he builds his far-right network across the EU. At home, however, a different story could be emerging after 15 years in power. Opinion polls suggest the Orban popularity is crumbling under the weight of corruption, economic stagnation, high inflation and ailing public services. Peter Magyar, a former Fidesz insider, has emerged as a serious political challenger ahead of elections next spring. The Magyar TSA party has a 6 to 8 percentage point lead in polls. The Orban reaction so far has been to try to tighten his grip and encroach even further on the space within which his domestic critics operate. A new Russian-inspired transparency of public life bill aimed at groups that supposedly represent a threat to national sovereignty could allow Orban to crush dissent, shuttering NGOs along with the remaining independent media slated for a parliamentary vote on 10th of June. The bill was suddenly postponed to the autumn. The delay could be a tactical move. Orban may want to hang fire and deploy the law as a distraction if economic woes deepen. For example, in a full-scale Trump tariff war against the EU, but the delay could also be a sign of panic in the regime. Hungarian activists are pushing back against the slow but steady creep of authoritarianism. One of the striking things is how brave people are in openly standing up for their ideals. This is not a forceful kind of authoritarianism where the police will show up at your door the next day. It is a more insidious thing. Each development is small yet chips away at democracy. 2A headlines. The New York Times, June 11, 2025. California. The 2028 subtext of the Newsom speech. The New York Times. Democrats David Hogg to exit DNC. After backlash to his primary plan. The New York Times. France. This French senator has become the Trump European nemesis. The New York Times. Medicine and Health and Science. Democrats grill NIH leader on cuts. Who is calling the shots? The New York Times. Medicine and Science and Health. RFK Jr. announces 8 new members of CDC vaccine advisory advisory panel. The New York Times Must Trump Live updates Elon Musk apology, Pete Hegseth hearings and more. The New York Times. New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill wins the Democratic primary for governor of New Jersey. The New York Times. New Jersey Republicans prep for an all-out race to flip New Jersey with the Trump help. The New York Times. Poland. Tusk government wins confidence vote in Poland. The New York Times. Trump actions. Fulbright board quits accusing Trump administration of political interference. The New York Times. Trump actions. Trump fights to move appeal of hush money conviction to federal court. The New York Times. Trump actions. What happens to Harvard if Trump successfully bars its international students? The New York Times. Trump budget cuts opinion. Gen Z is barely holding on to the American dream. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts opinion. The Trump budget tells 3 unhappy truths about America. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts. Senate Republicans want to trim some of the Trump tax cuts in domestic policy bill. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts. The House policy bill would lose money could the Trump tariffs replace it. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. New China trade deal takes U.S. back to where it started. The New York Times. Ukraine amid Russian strikes. A remote corner of Ukraine beckons. The New York Times. Ukraine. McConnell tells Hegseth U.S. reputation is at stake in Ukraine war. The New York Times. Ukraine. Trump is pushing allies away and closer into other arms. The New York Times. Ukraine says it has stepped up its drone game again. The New York Times. United Kingdom. How the UK plans to boost its economy. The New York Times. Utilities. World Bank ends its ban on funding nuclear power projects. The New York Times. 2B headlines. The Guardian. June 11, 2025. Medicine and Science. RFK Jr. announces new panel of vaccine advisors after firing entire previous team. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The Guardian. 3. France. A cutting French senator becomes the Trump European nemesis, inviting verbal assaults viewed by millions. Claude Malhuret has issued a scathing critique of the American president, bringing a lifetime of experience to bear. Subsetted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. June 11, 2025. At a recent ceremony in Vichy, France, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe, a small dapper man stepped forward from the crowd to place a wreath at the foot of a monument to the dead. He listened to students speak of endangered peace, the defense of French values, and the fascist scourge that led to the gas chambers of Hitler. The seemingly unremarkable face in the crowd was Senator Claude Malhuret, who has become the European nemesis to Trump. His barbed speeches, viewed tens of millions of times, have cast the president as an incendiary emperor and suggested that never before has anyone so trampled on the Constitution. With a scathing directness prompted by what he sees as a presidential assault on the essential checks and balances of America, Malhuret has compared Trump to 2 tyrannical Roman emperors, Nero and Caligula. Malhuret, at the age of 75, is a retired physician and a right-leaning centrist who was the mayor of Vichy for 28 years until 2017. The town of Vichy in central France is a symbol of wartime ignominy for France. From 1940 to 1944, Vichy was the capital of the regime of Marshal Philippe Pétain, which collaborated with Nazi Germany to send some 76,000 Jews to their deaths in the death camps of Hitler. Did the past of Vichy inspire his fierce stand against what he sees as an American tilt toward tyranny? You know, people still come here and expect to see men with little Hitler mustaches. Malhuret said the so-called regime of Vichy should be called the regime of the French state, or if Pétain. By the time I took office here, I was already a visceral anti-totalitarian, whether of the right or left. Claude Malhuret took aim at President Trump during remarks before the French Senate in March 2025. The Vichy shorthand long proved useful in deflecting the direct criminal responsibility of France, whose soul was supposedly transposed to General Charles de Gaulle and his Free French forces during the years of Nazi collaboration. Only in 1995 did former President Jacques Chirac cut through the evasiveness by saying that the criminal folly of those Vichy years was seconded by the French state. Malhuret is precise and direct. His curtness is offset by a courtly manner, and he has no time for such obfuscation. His political philosophy was formed and is grounded in the atrocities and suffering he witnessed as a young doctor in Asia and elsewhere in the developing world. In the 1970s he worked for Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, the Nobel Prize-winning charity founded in 1971 to help those in need by providing aid and medical care in conflict zones. The experience shattered his leftist illusions. Those illusions had taken form in the 1960s. He abandoned medical textbooks to read half of Marx and all of Trotsky in a matter of weeks. In 1968, as student protests swept Paris, we were all in the streets to say enough He said enough of what was the question nobody knew. But that did not matter. It was time for change, for revolution. Malhuret is very reserved and very passionate at the same time, with a ferocious work ethic. His Trump demolition job in early March that spread quickly online lasted just 8 minutes. He thought the lessons of history had been learned in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union disintegrated soon after. I do not think we will see an autocratic liberal regime in the United States. That would be a surprise, but then I did not think that would happen in certain European countries and perhaps even in France, Malhuret said, alluding to Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Hungary and the rise of the far-right National Rally Party in France of Marine Le Pen. I asked why he thought the words of a French senator on Trump had such a global impact. Never before, Malhuret said in his speech, has any president issued so many illegal decrees, dismissed judges who could oppose him, sacked the entire military leadership in one go, weakened all counterpowers, and taken control of social media. This is not a mere liberal drift, it is the beginning of a seizure of democracy. Malhuret reflected for a long moment before saying, the Republicans are scared, the Democrats are stunned and leaderless, but I cannot imagine there will not be a reaction. The American people are facing one of the great challenges of the 21st century, as great as that confronting the French in 1940 when they had to decide whether to join the resistance or not. 4 Congress Democrats grill National Institutes of Health NIH leader on cuts. Who is calling the shots? Senators criticized the head of the National Institutes of Health for not taking responsibility for Trump administration cuts to research funding. Except edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 10, 2025. As the Trump administration clamped down on the American medical research funding apparatus in recent months, scientists and administrators at the National Institutes of Health often privately wondered how much autonomy the NIH director Jay Bhattacharya had. After all, the Department of Government Efficiency, the Musk signature cost-cutting project, helped drive decisions to cancel or delay research grants. But given an opportunity before a Senate panel on Tuesday to dispel suspicions about who wields influence at the NIH, Bhattacharya did little to claim ownership of perhaps the rockiest period in the many decades of funding research institutions by the NIH. Decisions to freeze grant payments to Northwestern University happened before I got into office, Bhattacharya told the panel members of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He repeatedly said a proposal to shrink the NIH budget by $18 billion, nearly 40%, was not his responsibility, and declined to talk in detail about how the cuts would affect the agency. On Monday, scores of NIH employees signed their names to a letter saying those actions had been undertaken on the basis of ideological preferences and without scientific staff input, effectively censoring research on issues like health disparities, COVID, the health effects of climate change, and sexual health. Bhattacharya said on Tuesday that he had set up a process for scientists to appeal funding cuts. The agency, he said, would vet appeals within weeks. 5 Senate Republicans want to trim some of the Trump populist tax cuts. GOP senators are considering whether to further curb the favorite tax cuts of Trump as they rewrite key portions of the sprawling domestic agenda bill passed by the House, except edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 11, 2025. Even before the House passed the sweeping bill carrying President the Trump domestic policy agenda, Senate Republicans made it clear that they hoped to make major changes to the legislation before the GOP was done muscling it through Congress. Several have wanted to pare back the cuts to Medicaid, the health care program for the poor that House Republicans envisioned in the version of the legislation that they approved late last month. A handful have sought to salvage tax credits incentivizing clean energy projects that the House measure would repeal. Many have pushed to grant companies price tax breaks for the long run, not just for a few years as their colleagues across the Capitol opted to do. The problem senators face is that each of these changes would be expensive at $2.4 trillion. The cost of the legislation that barely passed the House is already huge, so Senate Republicans are now hunting for ways to save money, a hazardous task that could involve shaving the ambitions of their colleagues in the House or in the White House. On the chopping block are some of the Trump favorite parts of the bill, like not taxing overtime. 6 Senator McConnell tells Hegseth the American reputation is at stake in Ukraine war. Testy exchange between a senator who strongly supports Ukraine aid and the defense secretary revealed a deepening split among GOP officials on the war. Except edited by Rossep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 11, 2025. 2 senior Republican senators sharply criticized Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Wednesday over the Trump handling of Russia in its efforts to end the war in Ukraine, revealing a deepening public split in the party on foreign policy. Senator Mitch McConnell, one of 3 Republicans who opposed the Hegseth confirmation in January, opened a Senate budget hearing with a blunt critique of President Trump's approach to Ukraine. It seems to me pretty obvious that the American reputation is on the line, said McConnell, the former Senate Majority Leader who leads the Defense Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee. Will we defend Democratic allies against authoritarian aggressors? McConnell, an outspoken hawk on Russia and military issues, has been critical of the Trump defense spending plan and countered the Hegseth argument that the administration was making the largest investment in the military in 20 years. 7 Britain allocates hundreds of billions to bolster its economy. Rachel Reeves, the chancellor of the Exchequer, broke down public spending plans including more money for the military, public transport and affordable housing. Excerpts edited by Rossep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 11, 2025. The British government announced on Wednesday hundreds of billions of pounds in spending on defence, healthcare and investment in infrastructure and housing as it laid out its economic priorities for the next few years. We are renewing Britain, Ms. Reeves told lawmakers, but I know that too many people in too many parts of our country are yet to fill it. The multi-year spending review will fulfill its top mission to increase economic growth. It followed announcements to spend heavily to improve local public transport, construct a nuclear power plant and build more affordable housing. Other departments such as the Home Office, Foreign Office, Culture Department and Environment and Food Department face a squeeze. Spending on schools after the cost of expanding free school meals will also be tight because of a change in the fiscal rules Ms. Reeves made last year. She unlocked an additional £113 billion for capital investments, laying out plans to invest more than £15 billion in public transport networks, £39 billion over 10 years on affordable housing and £30 billion to a nuclear-powered future. I have made my choices, Ms. Reeves said to lawmakers. In place of chaos I choose stability, in place of decline I choose investment, in place of pessimism, division and defeatism I choose national renewal. 8 Kennedy Jr. announces 8 new members of CDC Vaccine Advisory Panel. The health secretary promised not to pick anti-vaxxers, but some public health leaders accused him of breaking his word. Raw subview: only one of the 8 chosen by Kennedy Jr. is a qualified vaccinologist, according to experts named Cody Meissner. The 7 others include 4 that have spoken out against vaccines in some way: Robert Malone, Martin Coulter, Fritzef Levi and Vicky Pebsworth, who is a nurse with a public health PhD who claims she is the parent of a vaccine-injured child. Excerpts edited by Rossep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 11, 2025. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Wednesday named 8 doctors and researchers, including 4 who have spoken out against vaccination in some way, to replace roughly half the members he fired from an expert panel that advises the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The 8 members Kennedy named, 7 men and 1 woman, have varied credentials. All are either medical doctors or have doctorates. They include a psychiatrist, a biostatistician, an expert in healthcare analytics, a biochemist, a pediatrician, an emergency medical doctor, a public health and critical care nurse, and an obstetrician. Richard H. Hughes IV, who teaches vaccine law at George Washington University Law School, called out one of the new committee members, Cody Meissner, as a legitimate vaccinologist. Meissner, a professor of pediatrics at Dartmouth, has previously held advisory roles both with the CDC and the Food and Drug Administration. Offit and other experts praised Meissner for his depth of knowledge about vaccines. Hughes said 3 of the new members are legitimate physicians who have no discernible expertise in immunology or vaccines, but he characterized the remaining 4 as COVID-19 deniers, skeptics and outright anti-vaccine individuals. By far the Most contentious pick and the one with the highest profile is Robert Malone. Robert Malone played an early role in research and has claimed to be the inventor of the technology. Malone became a right-wing star after a 2021 appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience that exposed both Malone and Rogan to criticism that they had spread misinformation. Malone was a vocal critic of the COVID response of the Biden administration. Malone has a well-documented history of promoting conspiracy theories and unproven treatment like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19, said Jeffrey D. Klausner, an epidemiologist and infectious disease expert at the University of Southern California. Klausner, who is also a Kennedy Jr. neighbor in Los Angeles and has spoken with Kennedy Jr. about possible candidates for advisory committees, said he was disappointed in the Malone appointment. Martin Kulldorff, a Swedish biostatistician and former Harvard professor, has been generally supportive of vaccines and has advised the CDC on vaccine safety, but he opposed COVID vaccine mandates and COVID vaccination for children and became caught up in pandemic politics in 2020 as a lead author of the Great Barrington Declaration, a document that opposed lockdowns, but it drew intense backlash from Anthony S. Fauci and other public health leaders who branded it dangerous. Francis S. Collins, the NIH director at the time, called the authors fringe epidemiologists. Kulldorff was later fired from his hospital, Mass General Brigham, and from Harvard in a dispute over the requirement of the hospital for staff to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Two other picks, Reitz F. Levi and Vicki Pepsworth, the nurse, are also likely to come under scrutiny from public health leaders. Levi, an expert in analytics, risk management and health systems at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has criticized school closures and COVID lockdowns and warned against the vaccines. Dr. Pepsworth, the nurse who has a PhD in public health, serves on the board of the National Vaccine Information Center, founded in 1982 to promote awareness of the risks of vaccination. She has served as a consumer representative to an expert panel that advises the FDA on vaccination and has advised the government in other capacities. In its early years, the Vaccine Information Center worked with federal authorities to promote vaccine safety and to create a system to address vaccine injuries, but today advocates for vaccination consider it an anti-vaccine group. The Pepsworth bio on the center website says she is the parent of a vaccine-injured child. Her son, her only child, experienced serious long-term health problems following receipt of 7-live virus and killed bacterial vaccines administered during his 15-month well baby visit, which sparked her interest in vaccine safety research and policy-making and chronic illness and disability in children. The site says it is unclear how the committee will move forward with an entirely new membership. Its next meeting is set for later this month. Committee members had expected to discuss, among other things, a change in the vaccination schedule for the human papillomavirus vaccine, but it does not appear as though there is an agenda on the committee website.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies, which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEPView purple air PM2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.